Jacob stood at the edge of his ranch, staring into the fading orange horizon, feeling the emptiness that had haunted him for years. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying memories of a life that had slipped through his fingers. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the giant woman locked in the old abandoned barn, a figure of fear and legend. Yet, despite the warnings, his heart ached with a curiosity he could not deny. Every lonely night, he wondered what sorrow lay behind her towering, somber eyes, and why everyone feared her so. The first time he saw her, she was crouched behind the barn's rusted gates, her massive hands clutching the wooden bars like fragile glass. The townsfolk had painted her as a monster, but Jacob noticed the trembling in her eyes, a quiet plea for understanding. He could see scars running along her arms, each one telling a story of cruelty and misunderstanding. His heart twisted with a mix of pity and longing. No one had dared approach her, but he felt an inexplicable pull, a whisper in his soul that urged him to cross the invisible line between fear and compassion. Days passed, and Jacob found himself bringing small offerings, warm bread, fresh milk, and once, a bouquet of wildflowers from the ridge above. At first, she recoiled, her eyes wary, but slowly, curiosity flickered in them. He spoke softly, telling stories of the ranch, of the lonely sunsets, of the quiet nights that only the wind could witness. He did not ask for anything in return, and yet, with each passing day, a fragile bond began to form. A bond wrapped in caution, fear, and something more, hope. Rumors in town grew louder. Children whispered about the caged giant, adults shook their heads in fear, and even Jacob's closest friends urged him to stay away. But he could not. Every time he looked at her, he saw not a monster, but a soul as wounded as his own. One evening, under a sky bruised with twilight, she finally spoke, her voice low and trembling. Why do you come here?" Jacob knelt by the bars, feeling the chill of fear and warmth of connection collide. "Because you deserve someone who sees you," he said, his voice breaking, "not what everyone else fears." She blinked at him, a tear glinting in the fading light. The wind carried her whispered words like a fragile prayer. No one has ever looked at me like that." Jacob reached a hand to the bars, and she mirrored him, their fingers nearly touching. The town had caged her in misunderstanding and fear, but he saw the truth, a gentle giant, a wounded heart yearning for freedom and love. For the first time in decades, he felt a spark of hope for both of them. Night fell, wrapping the ranch in a velvet darkness. Jacob lingered by the barn, the stars above silent witnesses to his devotion. He heard the faint rustling of her movements inside, the sound of someone trying to make the cramped space her own. He imagined the life she could have, if the world were kinder, if fear were replaced with trust. He promised himself that he would protect her, no matter what whispers or warnings came. He would break the walls that caged her heart, even if the town never understood. The next morning brought an unexpected storm. Thunder rolled across the plains, shaking the barn's walls. Jacob rushed inside, fearing the worst, and found her huddled in a corner, trembling. Without hesitation, he wrapped his coat around her, feeling the enormity of her form against him. The storm mirrored the turmoil in his chest, a battle between fear and courage, between the safety of solitude and the risk of love. In that moment, he knew he could no longer wait. He had to speak the words that had haunted his nights. "Please, marry me." Her eyes widened at his words, disbelief etched into every line of her massive face. The silence stretched, heavy with tension, until a trembling laugh escaped her lips, a sound so human, so fragile, that it nearly broke him. You want me," she whispered, voice quivering with hope and fear. Jacob nodded, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. "I do. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The wind outside seemed to pause, as if holding its breath, witnessing the impossible connection between a lonely man and a woman the world had feared. Days turned into weeks, and Jacob continued to visit, breaking bread and barriers alike. She began to trust, slowly testing the boundaries of her cage. He taught her to laugh again, to speak without fear, to feel without shame. And in return, she showed him strength and resilience beyond his imagining, a gentle power that both awed and comforted him. Together, they discovered that love could thrive even in the darkest corners, that hope could bloom where fear once ruled. Then, one afternoon, the townsfolk came, angry and suspicious. "She's dangerous," they shouted. "Why do you consort with a monster?" Jacob stood firm, feeling a surge of protective love he had never known. He looked at her, her massive eyes steady on him, and whispered, "They don't see you. I do." A hush fell over the crowd as they realized she did not flinch, did not strike, but simply stood beside him, radiating quiet dignity. Slowly, fear gave way to awe, as if the world itself was learning to accept what it had once condemned. By evening, the storm clouds had passed, leaving a brilliant sunset that bathed the ranch in gold. Jacob and the giant bride stood side by side, their hands finally meeting without bars between them. The air was heavy with unspoken promises, and the first true smile of freedom graced her lips. The town, though wary, began to murmur with curiosity rather than fear. And Jacob, heart brimming with emotion, realized that love had the power not just to heal, but to transform, a truth neither of them had dared to hope for until now. The night was quiet, except for the soft murmurs of two souls finding each other. Jacob traced the line of her jaw with trembling fingers, marveling at the enormity of what he felt. "You're not a monster," he whispered. "You're my heart." She leaned into him, a soft rumble of laughter escaping, the sound blending with the wind. They were two broken souls who had found solace in each other, a bond forged in loneliness, fear, and finally, understanding. As part one drew to a close, a sense of anticipation hung over the ranch. Jacob had asked the unthinkable, and she had not recoiled. Hope blossomed in their hearts, fragile but fierce. The path ahead remained uncertain. The town's acceptance was far from guaranteed, and shadows of the past lingered, but for the first time, they faced the future together. Together, they dared to dream of a life where love, not fear, defined them. The morning after the storm, Jacob awoke to find her gone from the barn. Panic gripped him, his heart pounding like a drum. He searched every corner of the ranch, calling her name into the silent plains. Then he spotted footprints leading to the ridge above, massive but deliberate. When he reached the top, he found her standing alone, staring at the horizon. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of fear, longing, and indecision. I can't just live in a cage," she whispered, voice trembling. Jacob stepped closer, extending his hand. "You don't have to," he said softly. "I'll keep you free." She hesitated, torn between caution and desire. Memories of cruelty and rejection haunted her every step, warning her that trust could be dangerous. Yet, looking into Jacob's earnest eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: safety. Slowly, she reached for his hand, and their fingers intertwined, a silent promise of courage and companionship. The wind tugged at her hair, but she stood tall, taller than anyone else, and yet, for the first time, she felt small in a way that allowed her to finally be vulnerable. Word of their bond spread, and the town's whispers turned into heated arguments. Some insisted she be locked away again, others argued that Jacob had found something extraordinary. The tension was palpable, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they had built. But Jacob refused to back down. "I see her," he declared, voice ringing with conviction, "not the monster you fear." The giant bride looked at him, eyes glistening, and for the first time, she felt seen not as a terror, but as a person capable of love. That night, under a sky full of stars, Jacob brought out a lantern and led her to the barn door he had been repairing. "It's time," he said, heart racing. "No bars, no cage, just us." Her breath caught in her throat. Freedom was both thrilling and terrifying. She stepped forward slowly, testing the world outside, feeling the wind on her skin, the earth beneath her feet. Jacob watched with bated breath, marveling at the courage it took for her to step into a life she had only dreamed of. Days passed, and their lives began to intertwine. They worked the ranch together, her massive strength turning arduous tasks into moments of shared laughter. He taught her the rhythms of the land, the subtle ways of the cattle and horses. In return, she showed him how to embrace patience, resilience, and humor in the face of challenges. Their bond deepened, unshakable, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Slowly, the town began to see her differently, not as a threat, but as a remarkable woman who had found the courage to love. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, a violent dust storm rolled in from the west. The townsfolk panicked, rushing to protect themselves and their livestock. But Jacob and the giant bride faced it together, side by side. She shielded him with her massive frame, guiding him through the chaos, proving that strength and tenderness could coexist. In that storm, fear dissolved, replaced by a profound connection that neither could deny. For the first time, they realized love could weather any tempest, literal or figurative. The dust settled, revealing a ranch intact and a bond stronger than ever. Jacob looked at her, marveling at how much they had overcome together. "You're incredible," he said, voice thick with emotion. She smiled, a mixture of pride and joy, and replied, "And you're stubborn enough to love me anyway." Laughter bubbled between them, a sound neither had heard for years. It was unrestrained, healing, and a promise that no obstacle could break the life they were building. Winter approached, and the first snow blanketed the plains. They worked by the fire, talking for hours, sharing stories of past regrets and future dreams. Jacob realized that in loving her, he had found the family he never had. She, in turn, discovered that being seen and cherished was more powerful than any cage, any fear, or any prejudice. Together, they built a sanctuary of warmth, courage, and laughter amidst the vast, lonely plains. Then came the day Jacob knew he had to make it official. He led her to the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley, where wildflowers danced in the breeze. Dropping to one knee, he took her massive hand in his and looked into her eyes. "Please," he said, voice quivering with hope, "marry me. Let's face the world together, free and unafraid." For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with emotion. Then tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded, a smile breaking through, radiant and unstoppable. The town watched as they exchanged vows on the ridge, surrounded by the open plains. Some still whispered in disbelief, but others, inspired by the courage of love, cheered quietly. The giant bride's laughter echoed across the hills, carrying with it a message that fear was no match for understanding, and that love could conquer even the deepest prejudices. Jacob held her close, feeling the enormity of their journey, and knew that every lonely night, every whispered doubt, had led them to this moment of triumph. Together, they rebuilt the ranch, side by side, hands and hearts intertwined. Neighbors began to visit, curious and cautious, but slowly learning to accept what they once feared. Children laughed in the fields with her, no longer seeing a monster, but a gentle protector. And Jacob, once lonely and broken, finally felt complete. They had faced the world together, turned fear into admiration, and sorrow into joy. Years passed, and their love deepened like the roots of the old oak by the barn. Every sunset reminded them of the storms they had survived, every winter of the nights spent huddled together for warmth. The giant bride, once caged by fear and judgment, now walked freely, hand in hand with the man who had loved her when no one else dared. They built a life rich in laughter, resilience, and shared dreams, a life that no cage could contain. On the night of their 10th anniversary, they stood atop the ridge, watching the horizon blaze with color. Jacob held her hand tightly, heart swelling with gratitude and awe. "We did it," he whispered. "We found love, despite everything." She leaned into him, resting her massive head on his shoulder, and for the first time, she felt fully seen, fully loved, and fully free. They laughed softly, a sound carried by the wind, echoing into eternity. And so, the lonely rancher and the giant bride everyone feared wrote their own story, a tale of courage, patience, and the transformative power of love. No longer bound by bars, by fear, or by prejudice, they thrived in a life that was uniquely theirs. Every sunset, every storm, every quiet night reminded them that the impossible had been achieved. A love so deep, so enduring, that it changed the world around them, one heart at a time.